Hello, just testing this guy. And testing this guy. Hey Mo, can you hear us? You can, yeah? And if anyone online, is the sound enabled, hon? Brilliant. Okay, if anyone has any issues online, give us a shout. Hello. Welcome to today's Book Fringe event. We're a nice cozy one today. Thank you for everyone watching online and anyone who joins us throughout. My name's Myri, I run Lighthouse Bookshop. And I am thrilled to be welcoming these two today. I'm going to read their bios very briefly, and then we're going to launch into a conversation and maybe also hear some poems and readings. So I'm going to start with Joshua Jones. He's a queer and neurodivergent writer from Llanelli, I butchered that, South Wales. His debut work of fiction, Local Fires, was shortlisted for the Dylan Thomas Prize and very recently also for the Polari Prize. He's been widely published and anthologized. He co-founded Dyddiau, a library and art space for by LGBTQIA plus and neurodivergent folk. He was also the creative editor of Room.
You didn't talk about Ystafell.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. My limitations in language. That. An anthology celebrating queer voices from Wales and Viet Nam. He lives and works in Cardiff. We're thrilled to have him in Edinburgh today. And JJ Fadaka is a writer, facilitator, and radical based in Edinburgh. Their poetry speaks to the political urgencies of abolition, feminism, and love. In workshops, JJ draws on Afrofuturistic traditions to rebuild a world without barriers. She facilitates an emancipatory approach to political education and finds belonging in music, visual arts, and performance. And will you all put your hands together at home and in the room for JJ and Josh. So one of the main reasons I wanted this event to happen, and a question that I have for you both, is around your artistic practice and how as queer writers and creatives, as neurodivergent creatives and writers, you have come to be the writers that you are today, what got you here writing what you write now. JJ, you have a mic so you can start, and then I'll hand this to you, Josh.
First of all, I just want to acknowledge a really small event means that we can just truly get into it. There'll be no record of what is said, which is really good.
It means you can disagree with us and we won't take offense.
Yeah, we can just have a chat, which is really nice. The writer I am today, well, I'm an emerging writer, and you just start. You just start by doing, you just start by necessity. How did I get here? I think, yeah, I know almost everyone in this room, and you've probably seen me pop up at various jobs around Edinburgh. You just, I don't know, try and write your poetry halfway through your shift. If somebody says something that you think sounds really interesting, striking up a conversation with customers. I usually work retail jobs to pay the bills. Yeah, and drawing out what they're saying. And I think people think that they are not writers and they think that they're not creative and they're looking for a fountain of knowledge to tap into. But really, writers are just eavesdroppers that then publish what you say. So yeah, we just get there first. So I think everyone should write down their conversations because it's actually super interesting. Yeah.
It feels so phony, doesn't it?
It really, it's a cheat, honestly, a cheat code. Yeah, when you're having a really good dinner with somebody and then you're I'm gonna write about this later, and you don't credit them, it's terrible.
Yeah, I feel I need to start writing more about people that I actually like. Because I feel the driving emotion is spite. And local fires is just full of people I just can't fucking stand. And I was like, this person's an asshole. I'm gonna spend the next 4 years of my life with them.
Whoa, that's so interesting. I feel like I write only about people I do like. I forget about people that say stupid things or like rubbish things. But yeah, I want to write from spite a bit more. I think that'll be quite more like spurring in my work. Anyway, yeah, just by
It's a bottomless well.
Yeah, evergreen topic, anger and spite. But so is love. I swear. Yeah, just I think realizing that what you have to say is important. Platforming what your friends have to say. Platforming like the conversations that you have with your mum that can be like radical and like life changing. Just noticing those moments like, oh, this really means something to me, so I'm going to document it. And the fact that it means something to me is like enough of a reason to document it, whether anybody's going to listen to it or not. If you're quite early in your career, then you don't know if nobody is listening. So like you get to just say what you like, and that's where I think the most like radical and like peaceful work comes from.
I also feel like I kind of got into this by accident. Writing from necessity, writing right on the door, quite a lot. In between jobs, freelancing, writing when you can. But I also have a visual art practice, mainly collage and installation work. I do quite a lot, and photography as well. And I feel it feels quite normal to me, quite instinctual to move between formats. I felt quite insecure about doing it when I was younger because I felt I was just like jack of all trades, and just kind of fucking around doing it again. But then when I started reading Derek Jarman, and I was like, oh, he's a gardener, he's a set designer, costume designer, poet, memorist, and he just like do whatever he wanted. That was like sort of validation to do that as well. So the idea comes first, and then the format follows. I don't go into something thinking this is going to be a photograph, this is going to be a poem, this is going to be something. This kind of start doing it, and it takes its own shape. Yeah.
It's free therapy to make your own work and to make art. Like, I think about how, I love that you speak about like collage. Like, collage really means like so much to me.
Collage is so fucking great as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to remake something, to like, see a piece of work maybe that has like an interesting juxtaposition. Like, let's say it's like a radical's quote on the side of the British Museum. If we're gonna start calling people out in this really, and then you like. If you take that photo and then use another photo of the people that should be there, the people that are missing from the scene, and you add them after the fact, like that is saying something, and that is like disrupting that piece of work and like pointing out the obvious and leaving your mark also. And it reminds you that you can change things and that you can be like fantastical in that way, like bring fantasy and like politics together. It gives you like a bit of hope, I think.
Bringing fantasy and politics together is really interesting. I kind of had a stab at that. In the story, it's Black Country out there, and looking at sort of collective trauma, ancestral trauma, things like the Aberfan disaster, where I wasn't even born when it happened, but so every time I read about it or I watch something about it, like, it really hits me, and it like really moves me, and it's something that I come back to quite a lot, and sort of cultural, historical moments like that, and bringing it into a sort of bringing it into fiction. And in that story, there's black holes cropping up all over Wales, all over the country. Places where lethal trauma is happening. something for all this time or something for massive, depending on sort of the event and what's happened there. And bringing a sort of fantastical surreal. I find like surrealism, especially, and like sort of Dadaism and the absurd, like really great vehicles to express it.
100%.
Just tee these guys up.
Sorry, your question.
I love it. I love it. I want to pick up on something you were saying about that you're writing out of a sense of necessity, or you create into a sense of necessity, and also finding that you specifically, you were saying, Josh, like not feeling legitimate as a jack of all trades until you saw that represented in someone else that you found was, creating in a similar way, or a way that spoke to you. And one of the things I really admire about both of your practices is that you are both artists yourselves, but you also put a lot into fostering the kind of spaces that both nourish your own practice, but that of others. And I wonder if you could both talk a little bit about what that means to you. What are the spaces that you are seeking out or creating? Why did you create them, or why have you felt the need to be the one who goes, this is missing, and I would do this? And what is it to be that person? 6 questions in one, because I know that you're going to get started.
I remember like, I remember like 2 years. We started WID because we just felt like there wasn't enough weird shit happening in Cardiff, or there was enough weird people, but spread out. And we operate as a sober space. None of us are sober, but we just felt like absolutely not. But it's such a big drinking culture in poetry spaces and art spaces in Cardiff, I'm sure it is in everywhere. And it just felt that anyone who was sober or doesn't drink for like religious or the reason whatever was excluded. And so when we moved into a new space and kind of having to really build things, so kind of like quiet at the minute. But we were like, we're doing a poetry open mic, and it's 2 hours long. And you can have a cup of tea. You can go to the pub afterwards, like Yeah. I mean, it's just really, and people just doing fun. Because they're out with the apple. But yeah, we just wanted to foster a space where it's just accessible in terms of not just through like the physicality of the space, but through our morals and our principles, building up our library and our archive, and trying to be creative in how we get people, we bring it to them and bring them to it. And there's so many people who have ideas of things for projects, for events that they want to do and not knowing how to do it. And it's like, just come and have a chat to us, and like we will help you do this thing. With how our program built up, and then we were doing like 8 or 10 events a month, and it got too much, and we're like, we're not paid. And trying to have like everyone all like working and like trying to run this at the same time. So we've had to like scale it back, and that's something that we've struggled with, but also found joy in the fluidity of it. Like not being married to a physical space. Everything is so transitory in Cardiff. We were in like an old shop in someplace like half family, and our contract was like 21 days. So we could get a notice tomorrow, and it's like, you're up in 3 weeks. And we moved into a new building, and it's the same thing. And no matter what, that's the same out everywhere in having people, everyone's constantly using their art studios and having to move their practice around. So we just had to be okay with mobility, and also just how we run ourselves. We're thinking of going into more of a digital space and hosting online residencies, and we're currently rebuilding the catalogue that's available online and things like that, and starting. We've got a couple of hundred people on our Substack, so we're actually running that as basically like an online journal and things like that, and letting go of physicality.
Yeah, I think I resonate so much with like things that you mentioned. In Edinburgh, it's really tough as well to find a space. And yeah, if you speak to me for more than 5 minutes, you will know that all I do is speak about housing and like rent and the price of it. So I think for like queer people that are looking to start an event or looking to have any sort of gathering, like the first thing you're thinking is, where are we gonna go? Yeah, I think like the way that I like program events or like facilitate events is not at all separate from the way that I like meet with friends and the way that like my private life is. When you are exhausted and you've done so much, but you still feel this need for connection and you still know we have to meet, again, that feeling of necessity, you can get really surprised like where the resources come from. Like it's such a saving grace to have venue owners like Lighthouse, like other art organizations that can trust you and like want to open up without receiving something in return like immediately. Like that, yeah, it's such a lifeline. Not to be seen as like a financial unit, like, oh, these queer people are going to come in and then we get to tick a box and all their wee queer mates will buy something with the £1 and yeah, then also I can say I'm an ally and like stick this in my window. Like to not have that relationship is so rare, but makes all the difference. Like, you know, sometimes when you are like, if you have a really busy week and you meet your friend once, that can sustain you for the next month if you don't have time to meet again. That's what queer spaces in Edinburgh like this is like, I've dragged myself here after like a 40-hour, 45-hour week, and this is what is going to sustain me for the next 100 hours, you know? I think something else that's really important is like thinking about the cost of like gathering. Yeah, I think a lot of spaces, I don't know, like to be an artist, like it's seen as like, oh, you need to be like self-funded and find your own resources, and everyone goes home to their beautiful studio and like desk space and like makes work on their own, and then somehow they get an exhibition or like whatever the case may be. Even this language of like exhibition, like these markers of like success is so isolating to queer people. If you do collage, it's much harder to have an exhibition because you have to get all the rights for the photos and things like this. What about other ways of sharing? I would really love to see like some imagination like brought into like programming. Yeah, like how else would we like to gather, like apart from like audience speaker, like observer, presenter, like what other ways could we relate? Going back to absurdity, you know, I like workshops because we have a conversation and it feels like really non-hierarchical, and we can have like this space for like sharing ideas and getting really like worked up and feeling something, you know, rather than like quietly be like, yes, I can interpret this painting and I'm gonna keep all my ideas locked in and then go home. Like instead we can talk about it and like get each other energized, and then we can leave and hopefully do something with that energy. But people are so not used to that agency and so not used to like being asked questions. And I always ask people like, what would be your policy if you were Prime Minister or like First Minister tomorrow? And like they're like deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, no one has asked me what I want before ever. And that touches something so deep. Like if you are not asked what are your needs, what would you like, doesn't that tell us something about like the society that we live in? Doesn't that tell us about like how we are placed as citizens? Yeah, it makes people realize things without having to spell it out. Like, yeah, it's all the like work. I didn't come from an arts background, like I did a psychology degree, and No, it has its own faults. That's like a whole different conversation.
I did English there.
No way.
But no, I would actually really like to go back and do a photography degree.
Oh.
It was interesting what you were saying about like the money, financial side of stuff, because I saw recently that Scotland, people like using funding, right?
Yeah.
It's, like looking at stuff like being from Wales, it's like, oh, you're gonna be on our level. There's even less money in Wales, and there's like a third of what it was like 5 years ago as well. I'm going, it's just not impossible to get. And apart from the people who like get really, really good at just writing the applications, they just know like the buzzwords. But yeah, I think what you see as well is that people at first it's really frustrating that there's that money's not there, and people go, okay, well, how do I work with this? In the face of adversity, and I don't really trust government funding anyway. You have to. I'm assuming it's the same here, but you have to answer to people. You have to put their fucking logos and all of the shit, and do a report at the end, and all of this. And there's so many hoops you got to go through just for like £100.
Yeah, the loss of the open fund for individuals is really, really scary. Like, yeah, me and Josh, like, we're both neurodivergent, and I think that's like such a good time to bring that into the conversation. Writing funding applications, it's really painful to know that you are trying to smush your idea into someone else's framework just to get their approval. And even if people around you are like, oh, but then once you get the money, you can do what you want. That process of like writing funding can be really debasing and
so
really
competitive.
Yeah, and then you're talking to your friend and they're like, oh, I also put in this fund, and then now you're like, how do you feel towards that person? It's really difficult. It's really horrible. And government
and that's
money.
when you quite inspired.
Oh gosh. And government money is not clean at all. Yes, we're seeing loads of art organisations speak out against how bad is it that arts funding is being cut. That also relates to social conservatism and the government closing off avenues for us to speak on other issues like genocide, artists. It's a really radical space where we can create change and can bring in new ideas. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Thinking about how to work around it, we should definitely be petitioning the government to bring this back. It's such a minuscule part of their budget. Let's speak about nuclear weapons. Let's speak about arms funding. Let's speak about independence and what that could mean for Scotland, and how much our votes cost as well. What would you ask of a politician to actually go out to the polls? In the meantime, I wonder if you could speak to your boss and be like, hey, the fund for individuals has been closed. Can I get an extra 30 minutes on my break to work on my practice? Can I do my event here? Can my friend do their event here? Can I open up my home as a venue? If I know, no, but truly, we've got to do something. If my friend is now having to pick up extra hours to fund their practice, can I make them dinner? Can I also speak about how difficult it is to be a working artist, so people don't think that you're secretly rich?
I genuinely considered moving WID into my house, but me and my housemates who run it together, we'd work from, and he was just like, that's fucking insane.
But is that not what you're going to have to do? Okay, let's meet at our park. What is the core of what we're trying to do and why we are meeting? Do we need the fancy space? It would be amazing to have these things, and I never ever want to frame it we never needed government money anyway. But maybe it's time to think about what else arts could look like, and not making it so upper echelon, so pristine. I just think there's other ways of creating. Maybe our work doesn't have to be so permanent. Maybe it doesn't have to be seen by somebody with 6 figures. What about putting up work in your local neighborhood? What about local businesses that could platform your work, or you could have a stall there instead? yeah, I think I'm just a bit tired of like seeing work in the same places and like.
All of that stuff is kind of how it runs in Cardiff. Like there's only a handful of like the sort of big spaces really, and WID's moved into a building on the outskirts of town. I used to be in an old council building, and it's like 3 stories, and so there's a shift, umbrella, WID, pink, cable, and Parthian Books, all the same. And they all do different stuff. So shifts like music, there's umbrellas, visual art and art education focus. Parthian Books is performance art. WID is like text and art based. It's loads of different things. But the part of the building that we're in used to be police surveillance room. Yeah, so you can, there's a part of it where you can see there's loads of holes in the wall where they would have fed like the wires through. Because it was a TV back, and you just come in and like gate it right up. Just be like amazing. Yeah. It made it fucking weird. But it's just there's so many. It's one of the things that we get really frustrated about is that there's dozens of empty shop units, especially there, and some of them being closed beers, and where sometimes we're allowed to start an art thing in them, but for 21 days at a time. And it's like, this has been closed for 5 years and you can't just let us, like, and shift their own space. They were in the basement of a shopping centre, literally under the main street. And they were doing a thing when they contract thing. And they were there for 5 years. But you can't have longevity, but it's just like you just have this constant thing in your head,
Yeah, that precarity.
Yeah.
I wonder what it was.
Got used to it. Like you got used to having our art practice in such a transitory space, and yeah.
I wonder what it would be like to shift that feeling onto other people, like, and thinking about like
politicians.
forms of protest, and like one of the reasons I really love performance is because like there's no rules, and it's about like living your life like in the world you want to be in. And I think when I think about art, like I think about the effect of it. Like that's why I came to writing poetry. It was a vehicle for political education, like not for the sake of I want to be a poet. So yeah, what would it be like if you are, so in Edinburgh we have outer spaces, or like around Scotland we have outer spaces, and that's a charity that takes up empty commercial units and it will give it to art organisations or individuals for a short period of time until like a commercial renter comes and takes over. But what if you are in that space, and I'm about to take up one of those spaces, what would it be like to say no politicians allowed? Like if you are going to make me like work in precarious ground, you would be tipping the balance. Like, if I'm only allowed certain visitors in certain hours, I have to be really selective with who I want to come and see my work. That person doesn't include you. Because they love to come and take like a photo opportunity, to be like, oh my god, look what we're doing for young artists. What would it be like to bar them from those spaces? My biggest gripe is like when someone comes to see your work or comes to performance and they're like, oh, I can't believe you did this with so little. And it's like, how dare you, like, blood,
you
sweat,
could have given me more.
Exactly, you could have given me more, but they come and applaud you after they've taken resources away for still being here. And I've literally had, like, people who are in charge of funds being like, I'm so glad you're still around. I tell you the truth. Truly.
It's like, yeah, I'm surprised I'm here.
Truly. I'm here despite you. So let's start making an ecosystem without them. Because what I was going to say, like when you were speaking, was like, oh, bring back squatting, let's just stay. But I also want to be really realistic about what my knowledge base is. I don't come from like, I don't have a knowledge of like squatting. I wouldn't know what the first thing to do is, but I do know I can disinvite somebody from my event. And maybe that's like a practical step to getting back to that really like political space, that space of action. Yeah. Oh, me, okay. Okay. A year and a half ago, I released a little zine of work, Just because my friend asked me to, she had an exhibition and she like had a space. Oh, thank you. She had a space for some work and she was like, "You write something, can you print this?" So that's why the zine exists. So yeah, you can buy the zine, but I have written many more poems since. This one is called "Britain is a Suppressant." I was thinking about going on antidepressants and like all the things that medication can't fix, like yeah, the social conditions that we live in. And I wrote this last October, yeah, just thinking about the state of the world. So here it is. Britain is a suppressant. Politicians burp with hate whilst the newsreader talks. Endless drones hang over us until the next election cycle. Sanitized reasons for the scenes even violence itself could never dream. This place threatens to swallow any hope of truly living and take my body with it. Threatens to sew my lips shut, my cheeks sting as I chew at the seams. Grief and blood stains every page, attempting to put words to imperialism. Can we afford anything but to go on, to make another month's rent and try again? It's our second time round the dinner table for war talk. You broke their power and their silence in retelling the motorized eyes of Border Force, following you out the airport, onto the train, and into your front door. Our idols have fallen. I can't trust any one hero to save us, when punishment and retribution are all too easy to reach for. I live in a mosaic neighborhood. Our amalgamation complements the starry sky. We were grateful for the last days of summer's haze, before winter in concrete compounded the city's concerns. Let's bring back coalition in simple terms. Love and challenge me thoroughly. I feel strain in and out of the body. I am on this far side of the moon, trying until the answers to my anxieties emerge. And they live, transcribed from your lips to mine, in recipes and warnings we've all heard before. What can we make good here? So much has changed as I've grown from girlhood to something else. Harvest what you can from a community garden on barren land. My conversations are spliced with fading reminisce. My mind is just now accepting what my body knows. Winter's silence is pervasive. Industry is pressing crowds back as plumes of smoke, new oil and gas and warhead contracts swat away any assurance of sweet days. Britain is a suppressant. Its mouth open for me at the end of an October that will leave me red, raw and burned.
So I'm going to read a section of my poem in this anthology. It's a very long poem, so I'll just read the third part. It's called Mother Len Joyance, and it started off by writing about the statue of a boy in a park near my house, where the boy is kind of in like a sort of ballerina pose with a butterfly on his arm, and behind him there's a weeping willow tree in a pond, so I kind of see the weeping willow kind of like a mother siding with the boy. And the poem moves between Cardiff and Hanoi in northern Vietnam. And yeah, so this is for the end section of the poem. From boy to animal, being to object, the boy is just a boy, but also a boy looking at a boy. I am the boy. I am made of stone. When I look at him, I am looking for that three-letter word. There's never a second magpie when you want it. I wanted to write a happy poem, I really did, almost. This was going to be the one where I let in the light. Children blow bubbles at the boy, they burst upon the welcoming finger that says, look over there. I'm always looking over my shoulder, comrade. The boy's name is Joy. The young belly looks good because it hasn't touched a meal. Neither has mine. He is smiling, he is happy, his penis is a water faucet. The waters, whatever the weather, are cold. Birds perch on the end of it, mistaking their nest for roost. I wanted to write a happy poem. Instead, I became birds, bloated, sapped, drunk from drinking willows, weak scud running over the heads of men's lips, puckered towards sky to catch the copper's falling. The natural progression for a boy is to become a fountain.
I'm just checking my phone for online questions. But do we have any in the room? I know, yeah, it goes fast. Does anyone have a question in the room or a contribution that you want to make around your experience with the arts in Scotland or as a creator? Yeah, I'm looking at you very deliberately, and I'm like, you think about these questions very deeply, both as a writer and somebody who hosts these spaces. Do you want to ask a question or make a contribution?
Yeah, I find myself, well, at the start I was also having a hilarious recognition about the whole writing about what you're overhearing. I once had a conversation on train with Jane Goldman, where we realised that both of us were actually not listening to each other but eavesdropping and writing down the same conversation. Yeah, so I loved that comment. I think for me there's something that I've not got the answer to that I really grapple with, and I think we all are, about how to get the benefits of the infrastructure without the oppression of all the kind of baggage that can come with it. And it makes me angry when I see these spaces being built that become problematic for activity to happen and that we know is supporting our queerness or whatever it is that we're trying to uplift within the spaces. Knowing that the money is there to kind of build accessible spaces that make people feel comfortable. And I was hyper aware of that during recent protests as well, thinking about how uncomfortable the spaces that art was happening in were. So, going to a talk at the Gaza encampment at the art college and basically being sunburned for an hour while we kind of listened to amazing stuff about queer histories of protests in Edinburgh, and thinking how many people just can't access those spaces either because of the other kinds of thresholds that come in when we self-organise. So I just want to express a kind of longing for the possibilities of connections across the difficulties still, and access to all the spaces and not losing the safeguards that can come with the more problematic aspects of the funding. When we see a space like Summer Hall about to be taken away from us because it's a private space, there's that too. There's other ways that the pressures of capital can kind of impinge. Anyway, there was no question, sorry. I did the thing with no questions.
I'd like to comment on that as well. That when I went to Vietnam last year to meet with artists and kind of look at the sort of artistic landscape there, and it's such a privilege to be able to see how that infrastructure works outside of the UK and somewhere as nothing about. And they still have censorship, and so many artists, queer artists that I met, have experienced censorship. The person I put out a poetry pamphlet and self-published, and it was seized and all copies were burned. Another artist had a solo show, and the government tried to close it down. I also experienced censorship through the work I did there as well, where the book has, as well as the poems and the essays, and it has photography, and it has powwows. We did an exhibition of the text in the book, and my goal got censored because there's a stanza in it that talks about being followed around by the government.
Right, yeah.
And I really didn't like that. And I made a comment about that they have a statue of Lenin in the middle of Hannah. And yeah, you being able to kind of see how that censorship works and how that infrastructure works, and also people just doesn't stop them from taking their photographs, doesn't stop them from writing poetry, doesn't stop them from getting their work out there. And it was just really humbling to see how queer people just continue to exist and continue to make work, regardless of what they do.
Yeah, I think speaking to your point as well, Ian, there's that sense that we can do so much more if we have a myriad of places. You know, if you have one venue that's wheelchair accessible and another venue that can do live streaming and somewhere else that can hang paintings and somewhere, you know, if you have a diversity of things, then you can build community where people can dig where they are, show up where they can, or create for different spaces. Agitate Gallery over by Haymarket has started, they're a collective and they've started a database called Beehive of indie arts venues in Edinburgh as part of an answer to, like, instead of always chasing the same spaces, maybe we need to be, you know, looking elsewhere. Maybe it doesn't have the same status or stamp of approval as, you know, going to one of the bigger galleries, but you can do something different in a different space, and that might also then cultivate a different kind of art space. I wanted to ask if there, unless there's burning, oh, there is a burning question. I will ask my question afterwards. Here you go.
I had a couple of questions that may end up being comments with an upwards mark at the end. And I'm very sorry because I've always tried not to do that. Anyway, I had a question about your comment and your description of a server space, and I was interested in that and why we're often seeing a reluctance to engage in art, which I fundamentally believe often reveals a more sensitive or a more reflective part of ourselves without an aid of like not being sober, and whether that's something that you feel is I've understood correctly, or whether you feel like it's something else. And then a second part, or not a second part, but a second question perhaps, is about whether there's a need to cultivate a self-belief in order for people to engage or to create art, and what that looks like for queer people and people of colour in a space where the arts are shrinking, and how you have felt people have responded well to what you have been doing.
Yeah, well, like I said, you know, like, we were just kind of fed up with the drinking culture around the arts, and we just knew that there were so many queer and neurodivergent people in Cardiff who don't drink, and also the fact that, like, we're a library first. Like, do you know any library that you can go and get pissed with? So, like, as well as, you know, in the old space, like, we did art exhibitions and we had like opening events and that sort of thing, and late night events and book launches and all sorts. But each event was like 2 hours long, so people would go up length. When I started writing and I started doing these performance poetry when I was like 18, 19, I did drink quite a lot, just because it kind of helped me with the nerves. But then that sort of thing that does become kind of, you know, if you can only interact with people once you've had a couple of nights. It's just like, instead, like, having it as something that's enjoyable rather than like a necessity. Especially when I was able to kind of mature a little bit and like kind of self-confidence a bit more, and able to either perform and speak to people in spaces completely sober, or, you know, just having one effect on power and feeling like I'm able to connect with others and connect with myself without this aid.
And it's so powerful to cultivate those spaces where you're not the only one, and the expectation is you get to go along and enjoy a couple of hours, and everyone, if you're not drinking, that isn't a thing.
I don't trust people to the pub afterwards anyway, just
Yeah.
take 2 hours of your fucking day.
I wonder if you would speak to that as well, because you've cultivated a few sober spaces.
Yeah, so a charity I work for, Rhubarber, we did a sober party in January, which was really awesome. And yeah, it was like a sober like club night. And I had never been to one before, so imagine me like actually trying to like produce one. But it went incredibly well. One reason why we wanted to do it is because the people that we were working with, this collective from London called Misery, they are like a queer collective and they speak about misery and grief. Yeah, it's majority like QT BIPOC, so people of colour, and it's been a tough year and it's been a tough couple of years, and tragedy after tragedy. I think something really good about sober spaces is that it allows for feelings other than joy. Like people now, like they speak about queer joy and they speak about joy in resistance, but we don't really speak about what we need to do to get there. It's like show up to this place and be happy and be well, and you kind of leave your problems at the door. I think it ties into the comment that you made as well, like, yeah, where is like the community building? We can't expect to come into a space and automatically feel on the same level as everybody there. When you don't know the other person that is organising the space, you don't know whose work you're seeing, like you don't know them as a person, that invites so much like insecurity about yourself, because you immediately feel like the other and you feel on the back foot, like you don't have any knowledge. When I think about like big art institutions partnering with like emerging artists or smaller artists, I would love to see the same like openness that they ask of those artists from the institutions. Like, let's talk about what we don't know, our gaps in knowledge, let's ask some questions. What do you want from this relationship? What is like really important for you to get out of this project? And also like a belief, we will be here for you after. Like it's not like, oh, we're gonna use you again as like this like tick box exercise. Of course that's gonna make people closed off and make them, they would rather go to a space that is led by a peer because they know that person and there's trust. But if there's openness from the organisation side, come and meet our director, this is where our funding comes from, this is what we're doing about it. We are trying to be accessible, but what does accessibility looks like for you? It's amazing that, you know, there are these like standards that you can meet to be an accessible venue, but you know, neurodivergency is something that's being spoken about more and more in the last decade. In those places that give you that stamp of an accessible venue, are they considering that? And yeah, I just think it's about like not putting like a full stop at the end of your policy and not being like, oh, this is what we can offer, why aren't you coming? But instead being like, what do you need and what is missing from this space? We really want to hear from you and we really are going to implement it. I think, so I hope this is like making sense as like a follow through, but in soberness, I think it allows for feelings other than joy, for feelings of discomfort, and for you to move through that, and then we can work out, okay, how are we going to move through it? If you, yeah, also, it allows like you to feel more like a wider range of emotions. Yeah, and not show up and like pretend to be okay, pretend that you drink if you don't, or pretend that you don't, like queer people don't, like aren't at greater risk of like having issues with substances, or that yeah, we're not like masking something. I think it just allows for like unmasking and for us to like deal with what that brings up, that like discomfort and this reality that there is like a gulf between people that own something, people in control of a space, whether you open that space to other people or not, and people that attend. Yeah, I hope that makes sense, me smushing those two things together.
Also, if you just then maybe we do our events, we just come over and talk sugar, and you achieve the same effect. Have all these like all these you know, like a room of 35 neurodivergent queer people just like just off their heads on terrible.
Bouncing off the wall. Yeah, when Rhubarber did the sober party, we had like a grief installation. So imagine like in the midst of this DJ set, like there was like food before, because one thing that's really important for me is like not to assume that everyone has had a hot meal today. Even it's not just the thing of like wages and how much you can afford, but are you so busy that you have not stopped to eat? Like, has someone said, let's have dinner before we jump to the next thing, to the next task? And that's something that I forget, and people in my life like are really good at being like, let's sit down and eat something. So we started with this hot meal, then the music starts, and like, yeah, it's this amazing like queer DJs like playing the most like electronic music, and then there's people in the corner that are speaking about relatives that they've not heard from in months. They are speaking about climate change, and they are speaking about the genocide in Gaza. And yeah, so we had people write down the grief that they were holding and stick it on this wall, and it was just, if that's the reality of life, like these two things coexist. I find it really plastic and really like fake when people are like, let's speak about queer joy, but about what you're personally going through. It is, the reality of life that we laugh and we cry in the same sentence, and I think it's really important that queer spaces are able to hold all of that, rather than like slapping a smile on everyone and being like, we're celebrating queer joy, you know?
I think we are out of time, unfortunately. But if you had any questions that you didn't have a chance to ask, or you want to just stick around and chat to each other, then please do. For anyone that was watching online, I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions. And that leaves me only to thank you both so much for your time, for your writing, for your art, for the way that you hold space for other people. Will you join me in saying a very big thank you to JJ and Joshua? We do have